I am so happy to be here. My name is Megan Cirilo. I think most of you probably know me, but I'm Pastor Ephraim Cirilo's wife, your Texas State Administrator. Very happy to be here this morning. Today I want to talk to you guys about how to begin again with obedience. One thing is for sure, God calls us to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. I can remember the first time God called me to do something uncomfortable. It was soon after I had surrendered my life to the Lord, and which was right after graduating from college. And Ephraim and I began attending a local church. Now, we had been invited by two separate individuals to this church on the same week. These individuals did not know each other. Other than the fact that they went to the same church, they had no connections to one another. So we just knew that we had to check this church out. That church was Jersey Shore Church of God in Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania. And the pastor at the time was Pastor Drew Wilkerson. He was a very integral part of our walk with the Lord as new believers. And so that sermon that I heard that first Sunday was on forgiveness. And he had preached about how Christ had forgiven us, so we are called to forgive others. Well, I really enjoyed that sermon. I never thought I had an issue with forgiving. That was nothing that I thought I had struggled with at the time. I'm a pretty laid-back person, and I tend to forgive pretty easily. But at the end of the sermon, he presented an altar call, and he asked us to search our heart and to ask God, who is it that God's calling you to forgive? And so as I began to pray, I felt a tugging on my heart that I needed to extend forgiveness to my father. My father was absent as a child. I was raised by a single mother. And I just felt this tugging, like I need to extend forgiveness. I've been harboring bitterness towards him for maybe, 10 years. And so I prayed, and a couple weeks went on, and I tried to just shuffle it under the rug and tried to avoid it. I didn't want to have that conversation. That was a tough conversation to have. But God wouldn't let it go, and I wrestled with it. And I finally called him, and I said, we need to meet. And we had a meeting. And I told him that I struggled with the fact that he wasn't present. I had a lot of challenges growing up, and it would have been nice to have him there to help me through some of those challenges. And he accepted my forgiveness, and he also extended forgiveness to me, in which, we were able to reconcile. It was very freeing to be able to forgive. Well, soon after that came a sermon on tithing. Now, many of you probably grew up in the church, so you just grew up automatically tithing. I did not grow up in the church. So when Pastor preached on giving 10% of our tithes that morning, I about fell out of the pew. Dollars started adding in my head, and I thought, man, I just landed a new job. How am I going to give 10% of this income to the Lord? Like, what? This is crazy. I literally asked the pastor afterwards, is that off the gross or the net? He said, Megan, all that we have is God's. That's between you and him. And so I wrote that check off the gross that next Sunday just to be safe. Went home, did the calculations, wanted to make sure it was exactly 10%. And that next Sunday when that tithe plate came around, I was struggling. Ephraim was like, Megan, you need to let it go. He practically pried the check from my finger. And we dropped it in that bucket. We said our prayers, and I'll tell you what, God has never left us since. Ever since we began tithing so many years ago, he never failed us. We were never late on a mortgage payment. There were times where we, had some tight areas in our life, but he never left us stranded. He always provided for all of our needs. And so each and every time, God was little by little stretching me out of my comforts and growing me. So when the bigger ask came, Ephraim and Megan, we got a lot of college kids that are coming to the church, and we think you guys would be great at starting a young adults ministry, a college ministry. We think you can build a team and make it happen. When those asks came, we were less reluctant and more able to say yes. When God called me to leave my job and to turn in the company car and to give back the free gas card and to sell our house and, find something new based on one income, I was able to say yes, knowing that my God was going to supply all of my needs because all that we have is His. When God told Ephraim and I that He wanted us to move halfway across the country from Pennsylvania to Texas to Kilgore, Texas, we were able to say yes and walk through those doors. When God asked us to leave the comfort of where we had been established in Kilgore for approximately 8 years and plant a church in Conroe, Texas, right here in Conroe, Texas, we were able to say yes and walk through those doors with confidence and assurance that God would supply. It doesn't mean it was easy. There, of course, were still times of fear and doubt, and we wrestled. But God was slowly growing my comfort zone. This is one thing I've found to be true through all of my amazing adventures, and yes, I call them adventures because it's an adventure. You will never grow when you are comfortable. Can you guys say that with me? You will never grow when you are comfortable. Never. It's at the end of your comfort zone where true growth takes place. So here's one thing I've came to ask all you beautiful folks this morning. Are you too comfortable? When was the last time you allowed God to really stretch you? If you are too comfortable in your church, then you're missing out on the purpose that He has for you in your church. To reach people for Christ, you and your church need to step out of your comfort zone and begin to take some risks. Well, it's just the way we've always done it. That cannot be your reason for standing still as a church. One of the top reasons why churches die is because they refuse to change. Many churches are doing ministry the same way they've done it for 10, 15, 20 years plus. Same order of service, same prayers, same worship songs, same sermons. And guess what? A lot of those churches have the same amount of people or less. Are you gaining momentum or are you losing steam? Are you reaching lost souls for the kingdom? The matter is urgent. According to Lifeway research, churches all across America are dying. Studies suggest that around 80% of churches in the United States are either declining or plateaued. More churches are closing each year than opening. And while COVID-19 may have accelerated that decline, there is a broader, long-running trend of people moving away from religion. Unfortunately, if the church ages and doesn't reach young people, doesn't reach this next generation, or the demographics change and they don't figure out how to reach the demographics within their area, then churches could potentially close. Yes, there are financial pressures that will close a church. That is true. But oftentimes when churches close, it's more that they were not able to change when the community was changing around them, or they didn't have enough people to continue the congregation for the next generation. I'm here to encourage you today to plan your worship services and your ministries in a manner where you feel uncomfortable. When was the last time you planned a worship service and ministries in your church thinking about the unbeliever and not just catering to the saints? We serve a God of newness. Jesus famously once said in Luke 5:37, "People do not pour new wine into old wineskins." Too often we're trying to do what Jesus warned against. It's time to begin again in obedience. But taking risks can be scary, you say. Yes, that's why they call it a risk. Of course, it's very scary. In fact, fear is the number one barrier that keeps people from doing what God has called them to do. To grow means you have to face your fears head on. I tell my kids this all the time. You have to face the fear head on. You have to walk through the fear. You will not grow unless you walk through that fear. Risk always involves fear. So you can either face it or you can avoid it and remain stagnant and not grow. Do you think I'm comfortable up here speaking in front of all you beautiful people? Guess what? I'm not. I don't like being on this stage. It's terrifying to me. I mean, you could all be children and I'd probably be fine. I love children. But adults, they're less forgiving. It's a little scary. I'm not comfortable at all. But do you think Noah was comfortable in the boat with all the stinky animals? No. Do you think Abraham was comfortable when he had to sacrifice his only son? Do you think Daniel was comfortable in the lion's den? Or Paul in prison? Or Jesus on the cross? It's time to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's time to begin again in obedience. That same drive and that same passion that you first had when you first began your area of ministry can be reignited as you begin to birth something new within your church. The methods have to change. I know Pastor Ephraim said that earlier. They have to change. The message will never change, but the methods, the way we go about doing things have to change. I love Pastor Craig Rochelle's motto on this. He is, if you guys don't know who he is, he's the lead pastor of Life Church based out of Oklahoma City. He has over 45 campuses. Many of you know the YouVersion Bible app. Hopefully you're using that on your phone. He's the founder of that. He also has several podcasts. I love listening to Pastor Craig Rochelle's leadership podcast that comes out weekly. Anyways, his motto on this is, we will do anything short of sin to reach people for Christ. Man, I love that so much. Is that how you're operating in your church? Are you doing anything short of sin to reach people? Whatever it takes? Or are we still catering to the same people? The way you go about handling your ministry constantly is changing. The world is changing around us. We have to be willing to reach outside our comfort zone. When you are comfortable, we do not grow. And guess what else is going to happen? When you begin to take some risk, you are probably going to fail. Failure may happen. It's part of life. It's part of taking risks. Maybe no one shows up, or maybe the efforts will bring about criticism from people within inside of your church or outside of your church. Do not let that be the reason for not trying. We do not grow when things are easy. We grow through our failures and through our challenges in life. Too many church leaders do not take risks because they're afraid of these consequences. But failure because you've stepped outside of your comfort zone is not the worst that could happen. We learn from our failure, right? We learn from our mistakes. It can make your ministry more effective the next time. Don't let the what ifs hold you back. Well, what if it doesn't work out? Or what if this? Or what if that? What if it does? God promises us over and over again in the Bible that he is with us. He will never leave us. And here's what I've learned in all of my years with serving with Jesus. Whenever I am comfortable, I do not need, or at least I don't think I need, God's power or grace. But when I feel weak and am uncomfortable, I not only learn to lean on and appreciate God's strength, but I also begin to see how God has made me strong. In closing today, I want to share a story with you, an inspirational story. I've been so inspired by this woman. My daughter Anna recently wrote a report and gave a speech on who I believe to be one of the most courageous women of all times. I'm looking back here to see. There's Anna. Yeah, there's my sweet Anna. She's our youngest child. We have 3, Grace, Josiah, and Anna's our 5th grader. But she gave a speech on Corrie ten Boom. I know many of you probably know who she is. Her and her family were crazy for Jesus. These people literally risked their lives. Corrie ten Boom and her family were Dutch watchmakers who helped save hundreds of Jews during World War II. They built a secret room in their house to hide people from fleeing the Nazis. Eventually, they were caught and arrested. I'm looking to see if they're putting another picture on the screen of Corrie and where they hid the Jews. And imprisoned in a series of concentration camps. They loved as Christ loved. They would not accept the lie that certain members of their society were less than others. They weren't willing to ignore the needs right in front of them. They didn't live with the perspective that there is an us and a them. Instead, they gave of themselves to meet the needs of people around them. Corrie ten Boom wrote a book called The Hiding Place. And at one point in the book, you read that Corrie's family is faced with a very difficult decision. A Jewish baby needs a hiding place. And no one wants to risk the crying when silence is needed for survival. Corey's father states, "You say that we could use our lives for this child. I would consider that the greatest honor that could come to my family." Nearly 800 Jews survived the Holocaust because of their courage to get out of their comfort zone. They literally risked their lives for people that they did not know. I'm not asking you to risk your life here today. I'm asking you, are you too comfortable? And if you are, what do you need to do to get uncomfortable? How is God speaking to your heart? What is He wanting you to do to get out of your comfort zone? Maybe God is calling you to birth a new ministry, or maybe He's calling you to scale back on certain areas of ministry that aren't yielding fruit. Maybe God is calling you to develop a system to make disciples, or experiment with technology to enhance teaching and engagement. Maybe God is calling you to do some missions work or start a small group ministry. Maybe He is calling you to invest in church planting in the state of Texas. God's calling you to find ways, new ways, to make disciples. Whatever He is calling you to do, will you be obedient and do it? The same way Corey Timboom was comfortable being uncomfortable could be you. We are on mission to reach people who are far from God. There are people dying and going straight to the pit of hell. There is an urgency. We must change. If we don't, we die. Are you willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable? It's time to begin again in obedience. Thank you.